Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the remarks from my colleague, Senator Levin. I just caught the tail end of that, but it's a good segue into what it is I would like to say today. Today's May 16th, important day for me, as it happens to be my birthday, although I'm not really anxious to have any more birthdays, and it's no big deal. It's more important of a day because this is the day that Treasury Secretary Geithner said we have reached the debt limit ceiling. I read from this missive that just came out a little bit ago. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner announced on Monday morning that the federal government had met its statutory borrowing limit of $14,294 billion cap. This is the day we've been talking about for a long time, and in fact, this date had been advertised as probably the date at which the United States would hit the debt limit. Now, here we are with an empty floor on a Monday, and people are saying, whoa, shouldn't you guys have been in every night last week and all weekend to avert hitting this limit, because doesn't this mean that we have to default on our debt? Well, as the article goes on to report, through a series, and I'm quoting here, through a series of extraordinary measures designed to stave off a potential government default, Treasury has been able to move some money around so that now we won't reach that magic date until August the 2nd. Well, is this good news or bad news? Well, it's maybe good from the standpoint that we may have avoided a catastrophic situation today, but it simply postpones the date of the inevitable. And what I fear is that it simply gives us more time to not seriously get engaged in dealing with what is arguably one of the largest crises in American history, particularly in American financial history. And so when we look at what has been transpiring over the last several years, as all of us have watched with alarm our debt limit continue to climb at unprecedented rate, there has been not nearly enough debate and engagement in how we should address this. Now, I know the last several months have been filled with proposals and plans and dire predictions. And the last year, 2010, an election year, certainly aroused the interest of the American people, where I think for the first time the reality of what the increase in the debt and the deficits is doing to our country's financial health. I have this chart here on the left which says total U.S. debt and statutory debt limit from the years 1941 to 2011. Now, in 1941, we were, as of December, engaged in World War II. And we see a small little spike here in terms of the debt limit. Understandable, because we were in a crisis situation and we had to put all of our efforts and expenditures into production to address the war needs. But as we can see from 1941 all the way through to 1981, we moved along at a fairly low level of increase in debt and finally hit the $1 trillion mark in 1981. So for more than 200 years in the history of this country, we had run this country without going more than $1 trillion in debt. That's enough as it is, but I remember at the time in 1981, people were saying, how could this be possible? How could we possibly reach this limit, $1 trillion? We can hardly comprehend it. Well, the sad news is that since 1981, we have been on a steady incline, which has been accelerated dramatically in the last few years, of debt. And today, May 16th, 2011, we have hit the total of nearly $14,300 billion of debt. And this line continues off this chart and much higher in this room as we project forward the spending, much of which is occurring because of mandatory spending put in place on programs that were locked in, and it's obligatory spending on the part of the federal government. And of course, as we go forward, interest rate on our debt increases and the amount we pay each year increases. And so we find ourselves in a spiral, upward spiral of debt that seems to have no end. Now, this is no surprise to most people because there has been focus on this all across America throughout in the last couple of years. Throughout this period of time, people have had to stretch their own dollars at home in order to make ends meet. Businesses have had to make significant changes in the way they do business in order to make their ends meet. State governments have found that they're deeply in debt and have had to take some dramatic measures. But it's only now that the federal government is starting to look seriously at what we need to do. All throughout the year 2010, with no budget in place, Congress continued to spend. But I'm not here today to place blame on any one individual or any one group. I'm simply here today to point out the fact that we have a serious crisis at hand, and it deserves serious debate and a serious solution, or we're going to find our country in very, very difficult straits. Now, from this point forward, Congress has been run by Democrats and Republicans. The presidency had been held by Democrats and Republicans. So we can go back and say who's responsible for this and who is responsible for that and what about here and what about there. That's a wasted effort at this particular point in time. This is the situation we face, and this is the situation with which we must deal. I regret that the Senate to date, other than activities like Senator Levin and I have both, Senator Levin was engaged in, and I'm engaged in, that is coming to the floor at a time when the issue is not before us in terms of seeking a resolution, but simply stating the facts and urging us to move forward. I regret that this year we have spent a total of only 4 hours and 20 minutes of actual debate on the issue that has been put before us. Instead, we have been tied up for weeks on not trivial, but far less serious measures, nominating some judges to district and appellate court positions, dealing with the Federal Aviation Administration authorization bill, which took several weeks, and now we have been stuck on the Senate, on the small business authorization bill for several weeks, injecting here and there some debate and some talk and discussion about the deficit, but no real focus on that. If we do not set aside the less important and begin to focus on what we need to do, we're going to quickly find ourselves into the month of July, careening toward an August 2nd deadline, during which time the uncertainty that exists in the investment community, in the business community, in households in terms of spending and what the future might bring, all of that continues. What the world is waiting for and what the world is watching and hoping and praying for is that the United States Congress and the executive branch will work together to seek a solution to this problem that will bring reassurance to the investment world and bring confidence to our population that we've gotten serious and we're going to do something about this. Now, none of us believes this is going to be easy. None of us believes that this is going to be painless, but we simply cannot postpone the debate that needs to take place not only in this chamber, in the House of Representatives, but between the House and Senate and the White House. Some of conversations have already started in that regard, but also across the nation. This is a debate that has to come before the American people because they are going to be the ones to bear the brunt of whatever cuts and whatever solutions need to take place in order for us to get our fiscal, put us on a fiscal track to better balance. Mr. President, if I've learned anything in discussions outside this chamber, with people who have studied and analyzed and looked at this, it's that several things must take place, and they must take place immediately. A host of people who have spent their lives understanding the dynamics of the financial system, understanding the consequences of debt as a percentage of gross national product, understanding the consequences of how a nation rising to this level, the consequences of that to its people and to its financial future, and its stature in the world, and its ability to do the many wonderful things that the United States has been able to do, to lead the world in so many different areas. All of this is in jeopardy if we don't address this. And what they are saying, if I could bring that into just some basic conclusions, is, number one, this crisis is real. All you have to do is look at this chart to understand this crisis is real. Here's where we were in World War II when we were having to go into debt, which we thought was serious at the time. But look at what has happened in just the last 30 years. So the crisis is real, and is measured by historical analysis of nations that have faced these kinds of situations before. The consequences are always dire. And so therefore, number one, and I was glad to hear my Democrat colleague acknowledge that this is the case, because this is something both sides of the aisle are going to have to deal with, and both sides of us have to recognize that, one, the crisis is real and it's now. The second conclusion is we have to act now, not later. This is not something that we can postpone. Now, for years and years and years, as this line has gone forward, Congress has said we need to get to that, and presidents have said also, we need to get to that right after the next election. Well, there's always a next election. And now the latest thing we hear is, well, we need to take care of that after the 2012 election. We'll put it before the American people in terms of which way they want to go. Well, the American people spoke very loudly and clearly in 2010. If that wasn't a wake-up call politically, I don't know what will be. But nevertheless, falling into the trap of simply saying, waiting till after the next election, we might be in a better position to deal with it